the abstraction called the family. Now, I get the abstraction covers genetic things, but that's why I said brother-in-law, right? Although, if they have kids, they're part yours as well, of course, but when you are raised that the abstractions are infinitely more important than the instance, you support your team. You support your team. Never understood that.
So if it's the other way around, you think that instances are more important than the concepts, then you support that team, or what? Sort of, it's sort of between the lines, maybe, right? That you should support my team who is against those crazy people, right? So it does feel like the sort of semi-cultish flavor shines through here and there, right?
Never understood that. But it's a fantasy that is required to make hundreds of billions of dollars move from one person, one group of people to another, much smaller group of people in the realm of sports. You support the team. Team is an abstraction. You support the team.
Okay, but then family is an abstraction also, right? If father is an abstraction, a mother is an abstraction, and the in it's sorry I just got a message I need to take care of at some point. I was distracted. It's how should I put it? Everything but the direct sense qualia are some kind of abstraction or something similar, right? You might categorize them differently. An elephant is not the same as a circle. I mean, elephant is a direct cognition among your experiences or your perceived. I don't want to use the term perceive. The direct qualia, right? And when you are experiencing colors and sounds and so on, right? Then you from that you derive a concept, derive a cognition like elephant based on the concepts. That's how I should put it. But then a circle, is that a concept? No, that's more like just an abstraction, maybe even from a concept, right? Use something that is slightly circular to an elephant, right? We say its body has sort of a roundish shape, right? That is circular, more circular than triangular, right? And you could go on from that. Then numbers, are they abstractions from abstractions? What about the scientific method, for instance? That's not a concept, right? Like elephant. So there are differences, right? So it's a good idea to keep these things separate. As soon as you're talking of when you are using terms in this spectrum of philosophy, you would say, it's very, very important, in my opinion, to stay clear on your definitions and you're not violating categories of any kind, right? At least that's should be desirable from a good philosopher, in my opinion. A good philosopher will immediately clarify these things and try to stick to it, right? Otherwise, it's not good philosophy, even if the person putting it forth might actually think so. But I have yet to come across somebody in the sort of, let's say, popular sphere, right? I don't read academic philosophy because, they're so far up the government ass that that. I understand, I should say, not know, right? I should understand that I can't trust it, right? Because, you don't bite the hand that feeds you, right? So they're never going to come up with something that could potentially be, pointing out the obvious elephant in the China store. The government is pure evil, right? I'm not religious, right? But it's the sophistry. Politics is the sophistry that enables the use of violence to control people, right? It screws around so much with your mind that you cannot even identify that you are being threatened into submission. That's the point of politics, right? And all these people who benefit from the taxation that follows are gatekeepers for people who can potentially point out what is going on, right? So you could say civilization and society and these kinds of ideas, they're basically one giant conspiracy theory, right? Where people who are participating don't even know what the hell is going on, right? They think that the government is there to take care of them, right? And because it's a singularity of a kind, right? It's a monopoly, as Barack Obama has pointed out, it's a monopoly on violence. You have nothing to compare it to. It has to be a monopoly so that you cannot go and get whatever you get from them somewhere else, right? And therefore you think, well, we need a government because otherwise I wouldn't get my this, that, or the other, right? And what about the children? And what about the old? And what about the sick? And what about the weak? And what about the poor, right? Are they just going to lie and die in the streets, right? You know how it goes, right? Okay, I'm going on a tangent here, sorry. But, and I would suppose that, Stefan Molyneux is already aware of this. What I actually wanted to go to is, if he's pointing out that something is just a label you put on something, right? It is an artificial label, right? If you say that an elephant, and then all of a sudden you say that's an objective elephant, there has to be something added to it in order to you to qualify that you're upgrading it or changing the term. Or you're basically upgrading. You're qualifying it linguistically by saying it's an objective elephant. But what changed in the status of the experience of that elephant? It's the same color, it's the same shape, it's the same smell, it's the same cognition. Nothing changed other than you adding the term objective to it, right? That's not enough to qualify the term. And and these, as I think he rightfully points out, that these terms being used in these categories, these artificial labels, there's no new qualifier to justify the term, right? Other than maybe an appeal to some kind of emotion, right? It appeals to an emotion. It's like, it feels good that I'm a part of something that takes care of me. And mostly, I would say it appeals to women, right? The feeling that you're part of, you're not being left behind, and you can always have somebody who can help you and you can talk to, and you don't feel a part of, that's very strong for women, I would think, right? In general. I'm generalizing, so mind you, right? There are also loner women, of course. But, so what is qualifying it, right? If you need to, if you're upgrading a term to something, or you're lumping, that there's an elephant and a tiger and an ostrich, and you're saying that's category X, then what changes? It's still an elephant and an ostrich and whatever, giraffe, right? I hope I mentioned the same animals. But the same three animals, nothing changed. You just stuck some label on it, right? So what qualifies it, right? What is it that qualifies it? There might be some similarities between these three kinds of animals. They all have legs, maybe, right? So you could say, well, but these are the kinds of animals. X is a category of animals with legs. Okay, but it just clarifies certain subcategories or concepts within the concepts mentioned in the group, right? So be careful not to put too much emphasis on these kinds of categories, right? And that's what he's trying to get at. And I would agree with that. I think that's a good kind of thinking. But then he should make sure that he universalizes it, as he usually, that he is Mr. Universality, right? Universally preferable behavior is to universalize. When you say this is how you do it, then you universalize it, I would think, right? So let's keep that in mind.
And even though the team may look nothing like you, the team may have changed. There may be no, like when I was a kid, I mean, obviously there are no members of Crystal Palace still in the team Crystal Palace. There's no individual members. You're not supporting individuals, you're supporting an abstraction called the team. And even if they change everybody in the team still matters. The concept still matters. The concept is what you have allegiance to, not the individual. Is it Queen without Freddie Mercury? Well, no. No, it's not. Is it Queen without John Deacon, even though he was only a bass?
They call themselves Queen, though Freddie Mercury has been dead for more than 30 years, right? Queen and Paul Rogers. What's the new guy? That I'm not particularly fond of that new singer there. I don't. Adam Lambert, I think, is the yeah. Though he can sing, but I'm not particularly fond of his singing, right? But they call them so Queen still, even though there's no Freddie Mercury there. So what is the term? I actually, it's interesting. I just wondered about this. I was lying sort of half awake this morning. I was wondering about band names. I've been doing some researching old vinyl albums and finding out what it takes for a vinyl album to be the first pressing and these kind of things, right? I actually think that's it's actually interesting to try to hunt for these first pressings, but that's another story. So I was sort of thinking about at what point does a band name no longer become valid to use, right? Could you exchange all the members of a band and still be called, for instance, Queen? Or I was thinking about, what was that band where there was only one member left? Or they had actually split the band up in more than two. It was the if you remember the old band, The Sweet, or just Sweet, from the good old glam days of the early 70s, right? Actually a pretty cool band in my opinion, right? They were actually very cool back then, but no, never mind. They created two versions of the band in later years. Brian Connolly, he drank himself to an early grave, right? The front man. It's actually a very sad story, but never mind. And then there was the bass player, or was it the drummer? I think it was the bass player who created the bass player's suite, and then there was the guitarist who made he's called Andy Scott. I'm not sure. I think it was Andy Scott's suite, right? So there was two suites, two suite at the same time. So what does it take? This category? It's just a label that, for you to have an idea of what we are dealing with, right? They could call themselves sour instead of sweet, right? But then you would think, but then the music must be different, right? And there's nothing that is given to you, but it's a pointer to what you're doing in a meta fashion, you could say, right? When you're saying, I am building a bridge to another society, something like that, right? I'm just coming up with shit now, right? You're not really building a bridge, are you, right? You're bringing some, some bricks and, whatever, concrete, whatever sticks you need to do, right? It's the function of a bridge. There's an easier connection between one group and another group and so on, right? That's the idea. That's the meta thinking or the rationalization behind it, you could say, right? So there's something to the categories. There's something within those in the category potentially that is a similarity that is not necessarily a part of that which is not a part of that category, right? But the category in itself does not exist. And if that's the focus point of his argument here, I'm on board completely, right? That the category seems to be, there's something about this conceptualization and categories that because you can't experience it, it becomes some kind of woo-woo shit haunting people, where they sort of feel, I can always go and look at an elephant, but, or look at a person, but the idea of father, I'm your father, Luke, right? It becomes more than just the individual, you could say, right? It's an ideal. It's a story. It's sort of it feels almost like it's larger than life. It's larger than just your direct experiences, right? And that has good and bad things to it, right? And the bad thing is that if somebody aligns themselves with this kind of category, people might feel that they need to obey that category, as Stefan Molyneux rightfully points out here, that the category is, I'm speaking for that kind of category. It's like when your children, if your child impregnates, your son impregnates a woman, and that woman has a child, all of a sudden you become a grandfather. How the hell did what happened? What the hell happened? I didn't know. Where is it? Where is the grandfather? No, you are just being lumped into a category, and there are certain expectations of what you should be and how you should think and what you should do and so on, right? And personally, I fucking hate that. I don't want anybody to tell me what I should think and what I should do, or lump me into any kind of category of any kind, right? And I agree with that. But what I am a little curious about in his categorization here is that the idea of family is not a concept. That's a category, which is a term he also uses, right? That Plato is not talking about categories. He's talking about the concepts, what you can cognize, like elephant or horse and so on, right? That's the identification of these concepts within your experience. That's the cognition. But you creating a category called philosopher kings or something, that's something someone came up with. I can go and cognize stuff without any categories imposed on me of any kind, right? And I suppose that I extend that to all individuals, or all the human beings, right? Can do that. So that is on the automatic, you could say. But the category of mammals is some artificial thing that somebody came up with. That's not a concept. That's not a cognition, right? So be careful when he sort of lumps these things together and equates the idea of a artificial category with a concept. And that's a problem I identify here, right?
He's there with mediocre guitar skills. He was still a great songwriter. So when you are raised with people demanding that you obey and respect and love the concepts, the abstractions, regardless of individual virtues. You must love your parents. Are there any specific actions that they have to make in order to secure my love? No. Honor thy mother and thy father. Not their behaviors, not if they do X, Y, and Z, but...
Oh, that's Christianity, right? That's one of the 10 commandments, right? So he's not particularly fond of that. But he seems to be screwing around a lot with, or flirting, I should say, a lot with Christianity lately, right? So he's sort of choosing, cherry picking and choosing what he likes and what he doesn't like. Now, I am highly sort of skeptical about his dubious fling with Christianity lately, right? After 10 years of basically bashing religion into this ground, right? All of a sudden he has become a born-again Christian, right? And this kind of sophist, I'm an atheist Christian, right? I have morality that is very Christian, but it's also secular, right? It's like, what the hell are you doing, man, right? This is fucking screwed up, man.
Just honor them as a category, as a concept.
Okay, there it was, right? As a category, as a concept. No, that's not the same. A category and a concept is not the same. The identification of an elephant is not the same as the category mammal, right? A mammal is a certain pattern within these concepts or cognitions that is established by human beings after the fact of a cognition, right? These categories wouldn't be there unless there were cognitions. So the cognition uses the concept in order to cognize. Right? There's a concept, you could say, in the mind called elephant, we call elephant, that is activated in order to cognize elephant in your experience. But when you go ahead and make a category called mammal, that's not a concept. That's just an abstract category. These are completely different. They have nothing to do with each other than the categories could potentially be a bunch of concepts, right?
Serve your country. Oh, is there anything that my country has to do to make my life better in order to secure my loyalty? No. You must just be born there, and then you must worship like ducklings follow an orange balloon. You must worship this concept called the country. You must obey.
Is it Clint Eastwood talking now? Go ahead, punk. Do you feel lucky, punk?
The country, the law. Oh, does the law have to be just, virtuous, justified, universal, moral? Not really. I mean, obviously there has to be the illusion that it is, but you must obey all laws. The law. So if you're raised with people who love you, then you love them as you grow, right? You love them as you grow. I asked my daughter the other day, when does she think that parents can begin to love their children back for their morality, their kindness, their empathy, or whatever? And she said, about 2. I would go slightly younger, but yeah, 18 months to 2 years.
What was that? I missed that. Maybe it doesn't matter. I don't care. This is not a moral discussion, right? This should, in my opinion, be about metaphysics. We're sort of schools of thought, though that I don't like that term, and it's sort of a fallacious description of what we're dealing with. If we're talking about fundamental metaphysics, schools of thought, it's not a school of thought. Metaphysics is metaphysics, and that might follow additional thinking philosophy from that, which would also be a part of a school of thought. So so this could be elementals or the starting points of 3 schools of thoughts, and the true origins. Okay, so this is where it goes into pocket psychologizing and saying, if you're not a materialist like me, you have a screwed up childhood, right? Sort of basically a stupid, strawman argument, right?
If you are raised where you attach, you bond, not with instances, not with people, but with abstractions, class, parent, country, race, whatever, it's where your loyalties are. Your loyalties are demanded to attach to concepts.
Categories, right? You're not concepts, categories. This is a problem that he doesn't differentiate clearly between this, right? It's a sign of bad philosophy and basically possibly sophistry, right? He just wants to lump it together and the one-eyed king talking to the blind and convincing them that he's so smart, right?
Then by bonding with concepts, with ideas, a strange thing happens where they become your emotional reality more than the actions of any empirical people, actual people in your environment. Right? You understand? People's bonding mechanisms have been transferred from people and individual actions to abstract concepts, which of course is camouflage for evildoers. Anybody who demands that you owe loyalty to a category they inhabit rather than their individual actions is robbing you blind in one form or another.
Or robbing the other ones outside blind, right? I don't know, somebody's robbing someone, right? And it's usually, if you're not sure who is being robbed, it's possibly you, right? Or at least you're part of a big money transfer. You might be able, the smart people in this kind of system, they understand that there's something going on, so they align themselves so they are mostly on the receiving end of all these money transfers, right? So that, yes, they pay their taxes, but at the other end, they get vastly more than they pay into it. So they can always say, yes, but I'm paying my taxes, right? And then at the other end, they get, 1.5 or 2 times what they pay in taxes in some kind of benefit because they align themselves with the sprocket where the money flows out, right? And this chasing of aligning, I want the, politics and elections and so on is by, okay, this sprocket or this, faucet needs to be closed down more and opened over here, and a new, this has to be pulled down, this faucet, and a new faucet put up here where money can flow out, and it's people aligning themselves in a place where they pay as little as possible and receive as much as possible, right? So it's this hunting for whatever and demonizing those who want to change the system, because if the system is changed, you have to realign yourself to put yourself in a place where you can, this kind, and then people demonize each other for wanting to change the system rather than getting rid of those assholes using that system up there to their benefit. All those big players in the market, they are all in bed with this government in order to control the system, man. I mean, you're an idiot if you don't understand that, right? And okay, I'm going on a tangent here, right? So let's get back.
Demanding that you be loyal to a concept and love a concept, and thus them, because they inhabit that concept. Honor thy mother and thy father. It's pretty wild, right? Now you could say honor all mothers and fathers.
If you're not Christian, are you still following honor thy mother and thy father or whatever, right? Why is that? Why is it? Isn't it just? I mean, I can't help thinking that because parents need to obey or feel that they need to obey the rest of the system, they don't want to obey their children also, right? There's something like, okay, at least I can command my children around. The rest of the world I have to obey, but I can command my children around to get a balance in this. Otherwise, I would feel like a complete slave or something like that, right? At least my children should obey me, right? So I have some power. Rather than dealing with the problem, which is all those people wanting to categorize you into something and then label you or treat you as they see fit, right? So getting back at the system is much more tough than controlling your children. I can't help think there's something there, right? And also, if your children is allowed to have an opinion about you as a parent, right? That would entail an ideal which you say, if you universalize it, right? That you should be allowed to have an opinion about your parents. Well, you never allowed yourself and were never allowed to have an opinion about your parents. So that would be cognitive dissonance if you allowed your children to be obeying or letting them have a say about your parenting, right? So you will have to either force your children to obey you just like you did with your parent, or you will have to go back to your own parent and say, well, you have to, align with my thinking. You can't just order me around. And that would, if it has already happened for 30 or 40 or 50 years, who knows? You can't just change that. Oh, by the way, now I'm going to be the child that makes demandments on my parents. Who's going to do that? Very few people are going to do that. And that's also aligns itself a bit with this defooing thing. Either you change your parents or you leave them behind if they're not good parents, right? I mean, there's no other choice in my opinion. If you want to take it head on, or you do it the hard way is actually to change your parents, right? Because that's not likely going to happen, let me tell you, right? Why the fuck would they change, right? That would be the same as admitting that they were wrong all the time, right? And they just played a stupid game with you. And if they don't want to change, well, you might have you find out you have to leave them anyway. So it's easier just to say, fuck that, leave it behind and go on your merry way, right? Become an adult.
Fathers, but mothers and fathers do different things and have contradictory ways of raising children. And therefore, you can't honor all mothers and fathers. And of course, each individual mother and father wants their child to honor them, not every parent in the known universe. This is honor thy mother and thy father. That is a bond to individuals, right? Thy mother and thy father, two people, right?
That's why I always say that Christianity is about control. It's about destroying children's ability to be an individual, right? That's all I see. It's child abuse of the most disgusting kind, where you're screwing with their mind in order to control them, right? You're screwing with their fucking mind. You're saying, oh, this God is everywhere and keeping an eye on you and you have to behave. And this guy who is hanging there, who is nailed to a cross and dead, died because you're a sinner, right? Holy fuck. Yeah, it's a holy fuck. You could say it is a holy mind fuck, right? And how would you expect children to reject that when they're 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old? They align themselves with it. And you see, in particular, when I'm checking out various interviews or whatever you want to call it with the Bernardo Kastrup guy, right, who's an idealist. All these people that a lot of those are sort of between the lines. I can sense that they have a Christian outlook, let's say, right? And it seems to me very clearly that they want to find some way of making sense of all this shit without rejecting all the Christian shit, right? So they want to connect everything into some big some big monstrosity of a combination of religion and science and philosophy and woo-woo and whatever, right? To avoid saying to yourself, my parents screwed around with my mind in order to control me, right? They didn't care of the consequences for me and my life. All they cared about was how to control their fucking children, right? In order to stay a part of that crazy category called Christian, whatever, right? This is, I mean, that's one of the biggest decisions in your life. Should I keep my parents around, right? I mean, nobody lives at home with their parents all their life, right? They move out of their parents' house. Why? Not just to be able to fuck a person without your parents listening in, right? Because you want to be yourself, you want to be an individual. So how deep should your connection be with your parents in your future? That's very important, that you take care of that. You shouldn't drag. There's an old movie. I haven't seen it. I actually want to see it. It's a very rare old documentary. It's called The Grey Gardens of something like that. Two very an old woman and her somewhat younger daughter living, the old aristocracy living in an old decrepit mansion with 50 rooms or something like that, and they're actually some family relation to Jackie Kennedy or Jackie Onassis, whatever, right? And this mother-daughter, Rapunzel kind of relationship where mommy can't let go of daughter and daughter can't let go of mommy, they have been entangled into some kind of completely dysfunctional, what would you call it, man, right? It sickens me that some parents, and I think that it's mostly mothers who can't let their children go, right? In the cases where there's these kinds of dysfunctional parent-daughter or parent-son relations, it's usually the mother, right? They can't let their children grow up and become individuals and move away and get their own life and so on, right? You have to do that. Otherwise, you're basically screwing with both your life and your parents' life, right? Because you are just enabling their shitty psychology, right? Okay.
That's a bond to individuals, a commandment to bond with honor and respect to individuals, but only as categories, mother and father. Those are universal categorizations of birth parents.
Categorizations, right? They're not concepts, mind you, right? Please don't confuse categories and concepts. Maybe I've been going on a lot of tangents in this part here, right? So this is mostly not it's just my spare of the moment kind of thinking and comments rather than an actual criticism on what it's saying here. In the grander scheme of things, I agree with this, right? I think just this confusing categories and concepts, that's problematic, right? Please don't do that.
Honor thy mother and thy father. Honor these individuals because...
Yeah, and you could say that this honoring, what is that? What does honoring entail, right? It's very quick. Honoring seems like you're noble, but what it usually comes down to is obey your fucking parents, right? And your parents has power over you. You are powerless. They can do whatever they want with you because you're a sinner, right? You have to have the stick in order to align yourself with the Bible and so on, right? Fuck off, man. Crazy people.
Of an abstract definition that they, and of course billions of other people around the world inhabit, but you can't love all those other billions of people in the world who inhabit this category, but only your specific instances. So you got the instance, but you can't judge the instance to say, honor thy mother and thy father, if they love you, if they're virtuous, if they are godly, if they treat you well. No. Honor the individuals in the category. The category is the essential thing. And of course, that ties into the fact that we simply do have to bond with our parents. And if our parents say, well, you have to love me, I'm your father. Why should I obey you? I'm your father. Well, I'm your mother. So you have to do what I say. When you live under my roof, you do what I say.
Yeah, that's also like when you live here, you have chosen to be a parasite on my household, right? It's almost like, hey, why did you arrive and to be, parasitic on my household, right? You chose to have the fucking child, right? Don't blame the child, right? So, yeah, I'm completely on board with this stupid thinking. I'm not on board with the stupid thinking. I'm on board on his description of what is, abusive parenting.
Right, which is how people end up conditioning themselves to loyalty to the country as a whole.
Okay, so what it's going to do, right? It's obvious if you haven't spotted it yet, right? And that is because you're used to appear or aligning yourself with categories, you're also thinking that concepts are superior to the actual instance, right? It's rather than the person, Bill, who's coincidentally also your father, right? Is the instance is Bill and the category is father. So therefore, when you experience Bill, you are categorizing or conceptualizing him as father, but that's not a conceptualization. That's an artificial category because mommy told you that this is your father, right? Who the hell knows? It might be the postman, right? Um, um, it's um, it's fallacious. It might be he's a. It's not necessarily Stefan Molyneux thinking that it's fallacious, but it might be that people are actually doing this fallacious kind of thinking, and Molyneux is pointing that out. I could possibly go with that, but at the same time, I feel what he's saying is basically a fallacious kind of thinking that he is imposing on those third-party people we don't know who are. These people out there he's talking about, right? So he's trying to connect the dots in a way I don't find that is find to be valid, and therefore I'm going to point that out as we go along here, right?
You live in this land.
Well, I think that if you have been trained to align yourself or obey a category called family or mother and father, it's obvious that government is mother and father for grown-ups, right? It's just an extension of the idea of parenting, right? They always use this category, the fatherland and the motherland, and the what was it, the founding fathers and so on, right? It's always this kind of, they appeal to this knocking you down using an appeal to parenting, right? Because that gets you emotionally. You're reminded of fathers and mothers. Oh, I have to obey them, right? And then they can control you using this, right? It's all about control. Always about control. Most people have no fucking spine, right? They need to manipulate you and control you and threaten you into submission rather than try to discuss with you, right? Rather than negotiating. They want to control you. They have no tool for negotiating. They have never been allowed to negotiate. So of course they can't do that. They align themselves with the techniques that was inflicted on them, right? So, I mean, in this regard, I might point out that if you are a freedom-hungry person, right, and particularly as a man, right, if you want to find a good woman, which is basically a fairy tale nowadays, right? It's the notorious unicorn. Look at the fucking family structure, right? It's as good as certain, unless the woman explicitly states and shows that she is thinking for herself, right? That whatever family structure is going on there is going to be imposed on you, right? If she has never been allowed to negotiate, she will never negotiate with you, right? So it's quite easy. Now, it's quite easy to find out how to reject a potential spouse, right? But it's not easy to find someone who actually works or function or has a brain of their own, right? Or the functional brain that hasn't been destroyed by parenting. Those are rare, right? Finding a good woman or a good husband for that matter, right, is not easy not because it's easy to find out, but there are not very many of them. Most of them have been screwed with, right? So, I don't mean in a sexual manner, but, in a mental manner.
So when you are told to obey an individual because of a category, you have no choice. As a child, you have to bond with the category. You have to say, well, he is my father, and I will obey him, and then I will fight him, and right, in my teenage years.
I may be able to sort of open up a little to this, right? You could say that categories of concepts, or concepts and categories of concepts, right, might be sort of in the same realm of things. It's the same kind of abstraction. It's sort of in the same category, right? There's something to it. I could go that far, right? But if we have to be strictly philosophical here, right, then what we are dealing with are not common people, you could say. We are dealing with the history of philosophers, right? They're not as common thinking as the average person who has been, trodden down by parenting, right? don't give me the argument that all these philosophers, hence until now and in the next 300 years of this potential history of philosophers, have all had this kind of childhood, and if they're not aligning with your ideas of what is good philosophy, they have had a bad childhood. Where I don't buy that, right? So would you mind getting back on the track and talk about the philosophers and what they are actually saying, rather than creating this elaborate sophist, a strawman argument, I would say, right? Very, very strongly points to being a strawman argument, in my opinion.
Because I'm ground down by this concept of father, like why, let's say, boys, right? Why do boys fight their fathers so much? Or their mothers, or both. Certainly single mothers, if in particular. Why do they fight their parents so much? Because they've been ground down by this category that you have to obey your mother because she's your mother. You have to obey her. You have to obey your father because he's your father. All right? I can always hear my own dad coming out when I do these things. So you have to obey your father because he's your father. Now, as a teenager, you've been ground down by this, you've been subjugated, you've been enslaved to the concept, but you are going to very shortly, historically, inhabit that concept to become a father yourself. So you have to fight like hell to throw off those shackles so you can grab those shackles from your father and impose it on your own children. You have to go from slave to master, victim to victimizer, the recipient of unjust power to the inflictor of unjust power. So you have to fight like hell against your parents so that you can inhabit that category which oppressed you, and now you use it to oppress others. You look at your own life, I guarantee you'll find this to be the case. Which is why you want to fight them, but not too hard. You fight too hard, then you become unjust yourself, and that's how the virus replicates. So when your parents lead you to reality, you become an empiricist. When your parents force, like whatever your parents demand you be loyal to as a kid, you will be loyal to, because that's your survival mechanism. When your parents force you to bond with concepts, then you become a...
Oh, so now we're jumping into concepts, right? Categories, he is blurring the lines here between categories and concepts. I think that's... I understand that he could argue why, these third persons out of this discussion could potentially be doing it, right? But a good philosopher would be very clear about the differences here. They wouldn't conflate concepts and categories unless they're completely crazy. And nobody's going to tell me that all philosophers, except the few that Stefan Molyneux likes, have all been confusing this, right? I don't believe that. Now, that's why I would call this a strawman argument, right? He's trying to conflate categories and concepts in order to say, because you have been badly parented, you're going to align yourself with concepts rather than direct experiences, right?
A Platonist, where concepts are where morality is, concepts are where the truth is, concepts are where things that matter are, because you have to bond with concepts in order to survive.
He calls himself a philosopher, right? When he says, okay, when you send me money, you are donating to philosophy. He's saying that, right? He said that countless times, right? So he's begging you to send money to a category, right? Not send it to Stefan Molyneux, but send it to philosophy, right? You see how fucking corrupt he is, right? He can sit in one place and say, oh, you shouldn't obey categories. Oh, by the way, you can send money to philosophy. I'm just a spokesperson for the category of philosophy, the concept of philosophy. Send some money to the concept of philosophy, right? I mean, this is what you have to do when you're reasoning or you're listening to other people putting forth their philosophy, and whether or not they actually are adhering to it or not. He would himself say in his Mr. Universality, he can't sit here and blame people for adhering to a category or a concept and then turn around and say, yeah, send money to philosophy. right? What color does philosophy have? What sound does it have? It's not it's not even an instance of any kind, right? It's a pure abstraction, abstract category of some kind, right? And he wants you to send money to that, right? He's so fucking deeply corrupted. He doesn't even know what he's doing, man, right? I mean, it's like, yes, you could have. It's like he doesn't even do it in a faulty way. He seems to deliberately be saying you should send money to philosophy because that is more powerful than saying send me some money. Send some money to little me. I'm very important because I'm an instance, but the category philosopher is less important, right? So therefore you should send money to Stefan Molyneux. No. You should send money to philosophy, right? Bullshit.
Bad parenting. You have to bond with the concepts. You have to bond with the ideas. And thoughts, not things. Ideas, not people. Concepts, not actions. That's what you bond with. So, when a theory comes along.
Concepts, not actions? That's a false dichotomy. Actions is not conceptualized. They are interpreted. Right? That's an interpretation of how things move about. Those things that are moving about, those are the categories, or the concepts you have cognized, right? But you don't cognize how they move around. That's another part of your brain trying to interpret that movement, that change in placement, or whatever you want to call it, right? So comparing those changes with the concepts or categories is a comparison error and a false dichotomy, something like that, right? It doesn't work. It's stupid.
And says that the truth is not in reality. The truth and the virtue are in concepts and abstractions. You're like, yeah, that feels right, man. That totally feels right.
Truth and virtue. Stop that, right? Virtue that's part of ethics, and true is a part of epistemology. Don't do that when you're doing the ground floor here, right? So otherwise, you're just alluding to you might be doing some metaphysics, but you're doing everything under the sun and what pops into your mind at any given moment, right? That's not good presented philosophy, in my opinion.
Right, because that's what I had to bond with. And if you could talk to a duckling who bonded with an orange balloon, and you could say to the duckling that parenthood is in orange balloons, they'd be like, yeah, it makes sense to me. That's what I bonded with. And empiricism is used by people who wish to overthrow the current morals of society, because you can't get an ought from an is.
That's actually interesting. I have heard about that ducklings and chickens or whatever, right, can have to bond with some object, apparently, right? And if it's an orange balloon that they bond with, then they'll bond with that orange balloon rather than the duck mother duck or whatever it's called, right? And that's interesting because a mother duck doesn't look very much like an orange balloon that is basically a sphere, right? But there might be some interesting points to maybe think about, which is the relation between concepts and geometry, which I've been doing some thinking about, right? That where does geometry come from? Well, I would say it's an abstraction from concepts. And also, if you think about it, if there are certain textbooks on learning how to draw a Donald Duck, or draw an animal of some kind, right? Where you start by making just some circles and some ovals and some whatever, right? Squares or whatever, and then that becomes potentially an elephant or a mouse or whatever, right? But first it's just the circles, right? And this might point to that the mind can extract from the concept these particular perfect geometric forms. And those geometric forms still have some connotations because they are derived from the concepts, which is my sort of theory, right? you can use them the other way in order to create, for instance, a drawing of that particular concept, right? So there's some relation between geometry and concepts, in my opinion. And this balloon approach of ducks, why would it's like they're working from some very ground floor things in order to find something to, and within the evolution of ducks, orange balloons have not been, is the last few seconds, 0.1% of their, total, earthly existence, or, evolution, right? Okay.
Empiricism is used, which is why so many atheists tend to be leftists, hard leftists, or medium leftists. So empiricism is used as a mechanism to overthrow the morals of the current society, because empiricism is used to destroy God as a delivery mechanism for morality. So empiricism has its dangers, its grave dangers. Now, what about so we have good parenting and we have abuse. When you abuse...
That's a strong dichotomy, right? That it's a great gradation. You can't lump it into good parenting, bad parenting, right? There's all the gray areas, right, in between. So this is also difficult in his thinking here, right? It doesn't work.
Abuse a child, you have to demand that child's loyalty. And when you demand that child's loyalty, you have to have a mechanism by which you can demand that loyalty, and that mechanism is this abstract concept called parents.
Now, all these philosophers he's going to tell us had bad parenting, right? Which is just grabbed out of nowhere, in my opinion. Who the hell knows how these philosophers were brought up, right? It's like saying, yeah, if it's before, 1950, they were all spanked. No. And, he's an example of somebody who has a shitty childhood and yet ended up doing philosophy, right? And, okay, he's not the worst of the bunch, maybe, right? But maybe not particularly good, in my opinion. So it doesn't necessarily follow, right? I'm just I'm suspicious. I'm on board with that. When you have something that is stated by a philosopher, you can go and say, okay, why would the person state this? But he's trying to create an elaborate system over here that has nothing to do with whatever was written or spoken or stated by these philosophers. He's creating a whole sphere here that he needs to explain the world in a very simple dichotomies and so on, and very black and white kind of thinking, in my opinion, at least in this case, right? And then just go and say, and that's why this philosopher in 18 whatever, right, is like this, says this. I don't buy that at all, right? Okay, let's keep the rest. We are at the 35 minutes, and there's sort of 16 minutes left of his dissertation here. And I'm getting close to the 1 hour mark. So please share, like and subscribe. Consider the board, consider the donation. I would love to have some donations. I wouldn't mind that. Not that I want to be rich in it, but just maybe I could upgrade to another better studio, and whatever, and better microphone. How it goes, right? But not that I don't like to do it this way, but right? Would be nice. Maybe there's a future there somewhere. Otherwise, have a nice day. See you in the next one.